The red alert blared through every deck of the UES Defender, its warning lights casting an eerie glow across Captain James Miller's tired face. He gripped the edges of his command chair, watching the tactical display with growing despair. 15 Earth ships against 40 stellar Dominion vessels, and those were just the ones they could see through the sensor jamming. "Sir, hull reports damage on decks 3 through 7, shouted Tom Barnes from his station. The young weapons officer's voice cracked with stress. "We can't take much more of this." Miller knew he was right. The battle had been raging for 6 hours straight, and the United Earth Fleet was losing badly. The year 2457 would be remembered as humanity's last stand, if anyone survived to remember it at all. "Status on the colony ships?" Miller asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Behind them, nearly 20,000 civilians were attempting to evacuate Earth's largest space colony. If the Defender and the rest of the fleet failed here, those people would have nowhere to run. "Still 17 minutes from the jump point, Captain," replied Susan Wright, her hands flying over the navigation console. "The Dominion ships are closing in fast. They'll be in range of the civilian vessels in less than 5 minutes." Miller closed his eyes for a moment. They had fought well, but the Stellar Dominion's technology was simply too advanced. Their energy weapons cut through Earth's best shields like paper, and their ships could take 10 times the punishment of anything humanity had built. "All ships, this is Captain Miller." He broadcast to the remaining fleet. "Form up on the Defender. We're going to give those colonists every second we can. It's been an honor serving with." A blast rocked the bridge, cutting off his words. Miller was thrown from his chair, his head smacking against the deck. Through blurred vision, he saw emergency force fields snap into place where a hull breach had opened up the port side of the bridge to space. Multiple direct hits. Tom yelled over the chaos of damage control alarms. "Primary weapons are offline. Shield generators air." "Captain," Susan's shocked voice cut through the noise. "Something's happening." Miller pulled himself back into his chair, blinking away stars from his vision. At first, he thought the main view screen was malfunctioning. The space between the Earth fleet and the Dominion Armada seemed to be rippling. It started as a subtle distortion, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Then the distortion grew, spreading outward in a perfect sphere nearly a kilometer wide. The Dominion ships nearest to the phenomenon immediately broke formation, trying to back away. "Are they launching some new weapon?" Miller asked, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew this was something else entirely. The sphere of distorted space suddenly collapsed inward with a flash of blue-white lights so intense that the bridge crew had to shield their eyes. When they looked again, there was a ship there. A ship unlike anything Miller had ever seen. It was massive, easily twice the size of Earth's largest battleship. Its hull was a deep slate gray that seemed to drink in the light of nearby stars. The design was clearly human in origin. Miller could see the familiar elements of Earth ship architecture, but it was somehow wrong, as if someone had taken everything he knew about spacecraft design and twisted it sideways. "Sir," Tom's voice was barely a whisper. "Those readings, I've never seen anything like it. The power output is off the charts. Their shields, if that's what they are, they're operating on principles our sensors can't even analyze." Before anyone could respond, the mysterious ship moved. Its acceleration was impossible, breaking every law of physics Miller had ever learned. One moment it was stationary, the next it was in the midst of the Dominion fleet. Weapons fire erupted from ports along its hull, not the familiar blue pulse of Earth's plasma cannons or the green beams of Dominion energy weapons, but streams of what looked like liquid light that curved and twisted through space like living things. The effect on the Dominion ships was devastating. Their supposedly impenetrable shields collapsed instantly. Hull plating that could shrug off Earth's strongest weapons melted and peeled away like wax paper in a flame. The mysterious ship moved through their formation with impossible grace, each shot finding its mark with perfect precision. The Dominion fleet is in full retreat, Susan announced, her voice filled with disbelief. They're running away. Miller watched in stunned silence as the mighty stellar Dominion, which had never known defeat in its centuries of expansion, turned and fled from a single ship. Within minutes, they had vanished into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind the broken hulks of their destroyed vessels. The bridge crew of the Defender sat in shocked silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The mysterious ship hung motionless in space now, its strange weapons quiet. Under the harsh light of nearby stars, Miller could make out markings along its hull. They appeared to be in English, but were too distant to read clearly. "Captain," Susan said softly, "we're being hailed." Miller straightened in his chair, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Whatever this ship was, wherever it had come from, it had just saved not only his crew, but potentially all of humanity. "Put it on screen," he ordered. The view screen flickered to life, showing a bridge that was both familiar and alien. The layout was similar to Earth ships, but the technology visible in the background was like nothing Miller had ever seen. Standing in the center of the image was an older man with gray hair and a neatly trimmed beard, wearing what looked like a naval uniform of unfamiliar design. "Captain Miller," the man said with a warm smile, as if greeting an old friend. "I apologize for our dramatic entrance, but it seemed necessary given the circumstances. I'm afraid we have much to discuss, and very little time in which to do it. May I come aboard?" Miller glanced at his crew, seeing his own confusion reflected in their faces. "You know my name," he said carefully, "but I'm afraid you have us at a disadvantage, mister." The older man's smile never wavered. "For now, you can call me Smith. And as for who we are," he gestured to the ship around him, "let's just say we're some friends you haven't met yet, from a place that's both very far away and surprisingly close to home." As Miller tried to make sense of that cryptic response, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything he thought he knew about humanity's place in the universe was about to change. The ultimate warship that had come from nowhere was about to reveal secrets that would reshape history itself, if they could survive what was coming next. The meeting room aboard the UES Defender was silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Captain Miller studied the man who called himself Smith, trying to make sense of everything he was hearing. 6 other officers sat around the table, their faces showing varying degrees of disbelief. "You're telling us," Miller said slowly, "that your ship is from 300 years in the future." He glanced at the 2 people Smith had brought with him, a woman with short gray hair who had introduced herself as Roberts, and a younger man named Jones. They wore uniforms that looked almost like old Earth Navy designs from the 21st century, which made no sense for people claiming to be from the future. Smith nodded, his hands folded calmly on the table. "I understand your skepticism, Captain. In your position, I would feel the same way." He pulled out what looked like an ordinary tablet, but when he set it on the table, it projected a detailed hologram of his ship, the Phoenix, rotating slowly in the air. "Our vessel represents the pinnacle of human engineering, circa 2757. Tom Barnes, the weapons officer, leaned forward with barely contained excitement. "Those weapons you used against the Dominion fleet, I've never seen anything like them. The way they curved through space. Targeted gravity manipulation," Roberts explained, speaking for the first time. Her voice was surprisingly gentle for someone who had just helped destroy a dozen enemy ships. "We create localized distortions in space-time that we can control with extreme precision. The enemy's shields can't stop them because they operate on a fundamental level of physics that your current technology can't access." Miller noticed something odd about the way she spoke. There was a slight hesitation before certain technical terms, as if she was carefully choosing her words. He'd been an officer long enough to recognize when someone was holding back information. "Why did you come back?" Susan Wright asked from her seat near the door. "If you're really from the future, isn't there some risk of changing history?" Smith's smile faltered slightly. "History, Ms. Wright, is not as fragile as many people think. We came because we had to. In our records, this battle was a devastating defeat for Earth. The colony ships were destroyed. The Defender and her entire fleet were lost, and the Dominion used this victory as a stepping stone to eventually conquer Earth itself. A chill went through the room. Millard thought of the 20,000 civilians they'd barely managed to save. "But you've changed that now," he said. "You saved us." "Yes," Smith replied, but there was something in his eyes that made Miller uneasy. "We did, and we'll continue to help you as much as we can. The Dominion will return, and in greater numbers. They've never faced defeat before. They won't take this humiliation lightly." "Then help us understand your technology," Miller pressed. "If the Dominion is coming back, we need every advantage we can get." Smith and Roberts exchanged a quick glance that Miller couldn't quite interpret. "We can assist you in upgrading some of your systems," Smith said carefully. "But we have to be selective about what we share. Too much advanced technology too quickly could be problematic." The meeting continued for another hour, with Smith and his crew answering questions, but somehow managing to say very little of substance. They agreed to help upgrade the Defender's shields and weapons, but insisted on doing the work themselves with minimal involvement from the Earth crew. Later, in his private quarters, Miller reviewed the recording of the meeting. Something wasn't adding up. He played back the moment when Roberts had explained their weapons technology, freezing the image on her face. "Computer," he said, "analyze facial expressions and vocal patterns of the subject during this segment. Compare to baseline human deception indicators." The computer churned for a moment before displaying its results. There was a 78% match with common signs of deception: subtle eye movements, micro-expressions, vocal stress patterns. They were lying about something, but what? A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called out. Susan Wright entered, carrying a datapad. "Captain, I've been analyzing the sensor readings from when the Phoenix first appeared," she said without preamble. "There's something strange about the data." Miller gestured for her to continue. "The spatial distortion that preceded their arrival. It doesn't match any known form of time travel theorized by our scientists. The energy signature is all wrong. But I found something else." She handed him the pad. "These readings from their hull. The metal alloys we can identify seem to be manufactured using techniques that were common 50 years ago, not anything we'd expect from 3 centuries in the future." Miller frowned at the data. Could they be using old materials for some reason? It's possible, but why would they? And there's more. Susan pulled up another set of readings. Their crew is only 12 people, but they're running a ship that should need at least 100. When I scanned their life support usage, it showed they're using exactly, and I mean exactly, the amount of resources you'd expect for 12 people. No variations, no fluctuations. It's as if the readings are being fed to our sensors artificially," Miller finished. He stood up and began pacing. Their uniforms look like ancient designs. They use surprisingly simple names. They're evasive about specific details of their technology. And now these sensor readings. What are you thinking, sir? Miller stopped at his viewport, staring out at the Phoenix where it hung in space alongside the Defender. "I'm thinking we need to find out what they're really hiding. Have engineering send Lisa Thompson to help with the upgrades. She's our best engineer, but more importantly, she's good at noticing details others might miss." "You think they'll accept help from our crew?" "They've been pretty insistent about working alone." "They won't have a choice," Miller said firmly. "This is still our ship. If they want to upgrade our systems, they'll have to work with our people." He turned back to Susan. "In the meantime, I want you to dig deeper into those sensor readings. Something tells me our visitors from the future aren't being entirely honest about where, or when, they really came from." As Susan left his quarters, Miller looked back at the Phoenix. The massive ship was a mystery wrapped in contradictions, and he had a feeling that uncovering its true origins would either save humanity or lead them into an even greater danger than the stellar dominion had ever posed. Lisa Thompson had always believed that machines couldn't lie. People could lie, data could be faked, but the machines themselves, their design, their construction, the way they fit together, always told the truth if you knew how to look. As she stood in the Phoenix's engine room, everything she saw was telling her a story that made no sense at all. "Please don't touch that panel," Roberts said from behind her. The older woman hadn't left Lisa's side since she'd come aboard, watching her every move with poorly hidden concern. Lisa pulled her hand back from what looked like a standard power distribution node, except it had markings she'd never seen before. Some looked Chinese, others reminded her of old Russian spacecraft designs, and a few seemed completely alien. "Sorry," Lisa said, trying to sound casual, "just admiring the work. The way you've integrated the quantum field generators with the main power grid is fascinating." She watched Roberts carefully as she said this, noting how the woman's expression didn't change at all, as if she didn't really understand what Lisa was talking about. "Yes, well, 300 years of advancement gives you some interesting options," Roberts replied vaguely. She gestured toward another section of the engine room. "The upgrades to your ship's shields will mainly focus on the frequency modulation systems. We can show you the basic maintenance procedures once they're installed." Lisa followed, her mind racing. In the 6 hours she'd been aboard the Phoenix, she'd spotted at least 20 things that contradicted the future technology story. Power conduits that looked like they were built using manufacturing techniques that had been outdated even before the Dominion War. Computer interfaces that somehow mixed holographic displays with physical buttons that looked like they came from the early space age. And strangest of all, sections of the ship that seemed to use completely different technological bases, as if they'd been built by entirely different civilizations. Her tablet beeped softly. A message from Captain Miller. "Anything useful?" Lisa glanced at Roberts, who was busy explaining something about shield harmonics to one of the Defender's junior engineers. She quickly typed back, "Everything. Nothing makes sense. This ship isn't from the future. It's from somewhere else entirely. Need more time." "The shield modifications are nearly complete," Smith announced, walking into the engine room. He smiled at Lisa, but she noticed his eyes were sharp, watching her just as carefully as Roberts did. "Your ship's defensive capabilities should be significantly improved." "That's great," Lisa said brightly. "I'd love to see the theoretical models for the modifications, so we can better understand how to maintain them." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Smith replied smoothly. "The underlying principles are, well, let's just say they're beyond current scientific understanding. Better to focus on the practical aspects of operation." Lisa was about to press the issue when alarms began blaring throughout both ships. The Phoenix's lighting shifted to a deep red, and Smith's friendly demeanor vanished instantly. "They're back," he said grimly. "Sooner than we expected. Roberts, get to the bridge. Miss Thompson, I suggest you return to your ship immediately." Lisa rushed to the docking port, her mind still processing everything she'd seen. As she hurried through the corridors, she passed more of the Phoenix's small crew, all of them moving with practiced efficiency, but something about their movements seemed rehearsed, almost artificial. Back aboard the Defender, she ran straight to the bridge. Captain Miller was already in his command chair, watching as multiple Dominion ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel around them. 65 ships, Susan reported tensely. "Much bigger force than last time." "Captain," Lisa said breathlessly, "I need to tell you what I found." The ship rocked as the first Dominion shots hit their newly upgraded shields, but instead of the usual grinding impact, there was only a slight vibration. "Shields holding at 97%, Tom reported, sounding amazed. "Whatever they did to our systems, it's working." "Target the nearest Dominion vessel," Miller ordered. "Let's see what our weapons can do now." The Defender's main guns fired, the familiar blue plasma bolts now wrapped in a strange shimmering field. They struck the Dominion ship's shields and passed right through them, tearing huge chunks out of the vessel's hull. "Impossible," Susan whispered. "Those were standard plasma cannons, but the energy readings, it's like the shots existed in multiple phases of space at once." Lisa grabbed the captain's arm. That's just it, sir. Their technology. It's not more advanced than ours. It's just completely different. I saw their engine room. They've got pieces of technology that look like they came from dozens of different sources, all somehow working together. It's as if they've combined technologies from multiple different human civilizations. Miller finished, his eyes widening with understanding. Not from the future, but from somewhere else entirely. The bridge crew watched as the Phoenix moved to engage the Dominion fleet. This time, their mysterious allies weren't holding back. The ship's impossible weapons lashed out in all directions, each shot finding its mark with devastating effect. But now that Lisa knew what to look for, she could see the truth. The Phoenix wasn't using one advanced technology, but rather dozens of different technologies working in concert, each one seemingly designed to counter specific weaknesses in the Dominion's defenses. "Sir," Susan called out suddenly, "I'm picking up some kind of temporal distortion from the Phoenix. It's similar to the reading we got when they first appeared, but much larger." On the main screen, space itself seemed to twist around their mysterious ally. For a moment, Lisa thought she could see something through the distortion. Other ships, other battles, other versions of reality bleeding through into their own. "Captain," Smith's voice came through the comm system. "I'm afraid we can no longer maintain the deception. Your engineer has no doubt discovered enough to guess the truth. We're not from your future. We're from your present. Just not the present you know. And right now, we need your help to prevent both our worlds from being destroyed." Miller looked at his crew, then back at the screen where the Phoenix was single-handedly holding back the most powerful invasion fleet humanity had ever faced. "Well then, Mr. Smith," he said firmly, "I think it's time you told us the whole truth." The Defenders' meeting room felt much smaller with the knowledge that pressed in from all sides. Smith stood at the front, his calm facade finally dropping away as distant explosions rattled the ship. Outside, the Phoenix was holding the Dominion fleet at bay while the two crews talked. "We come from an Earth just like yours, but different in every way that matters," Smith explained, his voice heavy with the weight of secrets finally being revealed. "In our reality, humanity never expanded to the stars. We couldn't. Our Earth was under constant attack from the moment we first reached space." "Attacks from whom?" Miller asked, though something in his gut told him he already knew the answer. "Everyone," Roberts said simply. "The Dominion was just one of dozens of hostile species we encountered. In our timeline, Earth became a fortress world. We poured every resource we had into defense technology. The Phoenix isn't a warship from the future. It's a warship built by humans who never had the luxury of peace." Lisa Thompson spoke up from where she sat examining data from the Phoenix's engines. "That's why your technology seems so mixed up. You've taken defensive systems from every human culture in your world and combined them." Smith nodded. "Chinese shield harmonics, Russian weapon stabilizers, Indian gravity manipulation systems, African quantum field technology. In our world, every nation developed its own unique ways of fighting back. The Phoenix represents the combined defensive knowledge of an entire planet that knew nothing but war for 3 centuries. A massive impact shook the room. Tom's voice came through the intercom. "Captain, the Dominion fleet is changing formation. They're trying something new. We need to get back to our ships," Smith said urgently. "But you need to understand what's really happening here. The Dominion isn't just fighting a war of conquest. They're fighting a war of extinction, across multiple realities." Miller felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean?" "We discovered it by accident," Roberts explained quickly as they hurried toward the bridge. "Our dimensional sensors detected them moving between realities, systematically wiping out humanity in every universe they could find. In some timelines, they use outright attacks. In others, they manipulate events to prevent humans from ever developing space travel. They reached the bridge just as another blast rocked the ship. On the main screen, the Dominion fleet was moving into a spiral pattern none of them had seen before. "That's a dimensional pierce formation," Smith said grimly. They're going to try to bring in reinforcements from another reality. We've seen this before. They'll pull in ships from a timeline where they've already won, where they've had centuries to build up their forces. Susan's hands flew over her console. The energy readings are off the charts. They're creating some kind of tear in space-time. Now you know why we had to intervene, Smith said, turning to Miller. Your Earth's development path created incredible advancements in offensive capabilities, weapons and tactics that we never developed in our defensive-focused world. The Phoenix can protect against almost anything, but we lack the ability to strike back effectively. Miller understood in a flash. You need our weapons. Yes, combined with our defensive systems, we might have a chance to stop them once and for all. But we have to act now, before they bring in their reinforcements. Lisa, who had followed them to the bridge, suddenly spoke up. The shield modifications you made to our ship, they weren't just upgrades, were they? You were preparing us for this moment. Robert smiled grimly. The modifications allow your weapons to fire through our defensive fields without losing power, something we could never achieve in our reality. Another blast shook both ships. In the space between the fleets, a massive tear in reality was beginning to form, its edges crackling with impossible energies. We're picking up ships coming through. Tom shouted. God, there's dozens of them. Hundreds. Captain Miller, Smith said urgently, I know we deceived you. I know we came here under false pretenses. But right now, I'm asking for your trust. What we do in the next few minutes will determine the fate of humanity not just in this reality, but in countless others. Miller looked at his crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that he felt. They had trained to defend Earth, but now they were being called to defend all Earths everywhere. What's the plan? He asked simply. Smith's relief was visible. The Phoenix will form a defensive sphere around the defender. Our shields can hold back anything they throw at us. Meanwhile, your weapons, combined with our dimensional phase technology, can fire directly into the reality tear before it fully opens. If we can collapse it while their reinforcements are still coming through, we can trap them between realities. Lisa finished, quickly catching on. The backlash would destroy their entire invasion force across multiple timelines, Smith confirmed. But we have to time it perfectly. Too early, and we'll only close the tier. Too late, and they'll bring through too many ships for even our combined technologies to handle. Miller took a deep breath, then straightened in his chair. Susan, plot us a course directly toward that tier. Tom, charge all weapons to maximum. Let's show these aliens what happens when they push humanity too far, in any reality. As the defender began to move, protected by the Phoenix's impossibly powerful shields, Miller couldn't help but smile grimly. The Dominion had thought they could simply wipe humanity out across all realities. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its weapons or shields, but in its ability to join together in the face of impossible odds. The next few minutes would either be humanity's finest hour, or its last stand across 1,000 different worlds. Space itself seemed to scream as the reality tear grew larger, its edges burning with colors that human eyes were never meant to see. The defender pushed forward, wrapped in the protective embrace of the Phoenix's dimensional shields, as more Dominion ships poured through from another universe. Energy readings are going critical, Susan reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. The tear is becoming unstable. We've got maybe 3 minutes before it's too large to collapse. Miller gripped his chair as another wave of temporal distortion washed over the ship. Through the main viewport, he could see phantom images of other battles, other versions of this same moment playing out across countless realities. In some, Earth's ships were already burning. In others, the Phoenix had never arrived at all. All weapons are charged to maximum, Tom called out. But these readings don't make sense. It's like we're getting power from multiple versions of our own guns at once. That's exactly what's happening. Smith's voice came through the comm. The Phoenix was moving in perfect sync with the Defender, its impossible shields somehow holding back attacks from 3 different realities at once. The closer we get to the tear, the more the timelines blur together. Each version of your weapons will fire simultaneously. Lisa rushed onto the bridge, her hair wild and her uniform stained with coolant from the engine room. Captain, I figured out how to sync our targeting systems with the Phoenix's dimensional tech. We can guide all versions of our shots through their defensive field and directly into the tear. Miller nodded grimly. How close do we need to be? Too close, Roberts cut in from the Phoenix. The temporal energies at this range are already starting to affect our shields. Much closer, and they might fail completely. Through the viewport, Miller watched as more Dominion ships emerged from the tier. But something was wrong with them. Their hulls seemed to shift and change, as if they couldn't quite decide which reality they belonged to. Some of them were firing weapons that existed in one universe, but not another, creating chaos in the fabric of space-time itself. They're desperate, Smith said, his voice filled with grim satisfaction. They've committed too many forces from too many realities. The tear is becoming more unstable with each ship that comes through. If we strike now, we'll take them all out at once, Miller finished. He keyed the ship-wide comm. All hands, brace for temporal shock. Tom, target the center of that tier. Susan, give us everything the engines have got. Lisa, keep those weapons synchronized. The Defender surged forward, its engines screaming as they pushed against the laws of physics themselves. The Phoenix moved with them, its shields glowing brighter and brighter as they absorbed impossible amounts of energy from multiple realities. Dominion ships are moving to intercept, Susan reported. They've figured out what we're trying to do. They're too late, Smith said firmly. Captain Miller, fire when ready. Let's end this across all realities. Miller took one last look at the tear in spacetime, seeing the endless parade of Dominion ships still pouring through. In that moment, he could almost feel the weight of all the other Captain Millers, in all the other realities, making this same choice. Fire. The Defender's weapons erupted, not with their usual blue plasma bolts, but with streams of energy that seemed to exist in multiple states at once. The Phoenix's dimensional technology caught the shots, wrapped them in layers of protective fields, and guided them directly into the heart of the reality tear. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to hold its breath. The tear began to collapse, but not from the edges inward as they had expected. Instead, it began to fracture, spreading cracks through reality like a breaking mirror. Dominion ships caught in the effect began to break apart, their matter scattered across multiple dimensions. The tear isn't just closing, Lisa shouted over the roar of straining engines. It's shattering. The feedback is going to ripple through every reality they've invaded. All ships, full reverse, Smith ordered. Get clear of the temporal wave. Both ships threw their engines into reverse, but the wave of distorted spacetime was faster. It washed over them like a tsunami of broken reality, making everyone aboard feel like they were existing in a dozen different places at once. Miller saw flashes of other lives, other choices, versions of himself that had never joined the fleet, versions where Earth had fallen, versions where the Phoenix had never come. For a terrifying moment, he thought they were all going to be scattered across dimensions just like the Dominion ships. Then the Phoenix's shields flared one last time, burning brighter than a sun. The dimensional energy was channeled, contained, and then redirected back into the collapsing tear. Reality snapped back into place like a rubber band. When Miller could see clearly again, the tear was gone. So were the Dominion ships, not just the ones that had come through, but all of them. The space around them was empty except for floating debris that seemed to fade in and out of existence. Status report, he managed to croak out. Shields at 12%, Tom reported shakily. Weapons are offline. But sir, the Dominion fleet, they're just gone. All of them. Not just here, Smith's tired voice came through the comm. The temporal wave will have followed their invasion fleet back through every reality they invaded. They haven't just lost this battle. They've lost every battle, in every timeline where they tried to wipe out humanity. The Phoenix's shields, Lisa cut in, concern clear in her voice. That last burst of energy was the last thing they'll ever do, Roberts confirmed sadly. Our primary systems are burned out. We won't be able to travel between realities again. We're stuck here. Miller sat up straighter in his chair. Then I guess you'll need a new home. He smiled. I think Earth could benefit from having some experts in defensive technology around, especially if any other hostile species get similar ideas about invasion. You trust us? Smith asked. After we deceived you. You came to help us when you could have stayed safe in your own reality, Miller replied. As far as I'm concerned, that makes you Earth's allies, no matter which Earth you came from. As the two ships limped back toward Earth, Miller looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in countless other realities, other versions of humanity were celebrating their own victories. The Dominion had tried to wipe them out across all dimensions, but instead they had only succeeded in proving one universal truth. No matter what reality you came from, it was never a good idea to underestimate humanity's ability to stand together in the face of impossible odds.